So, according to our agenda, we are supposed to commence now. So, most of you have already heard from me once or twice today. My name is Corey Wall. I have a solo estate litigation practice based out of Peterborough. I would like to introduce to you the members of our panel. Ronald Track and Jasmine Daya. They both are also solo practitioners. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the mic, I suppose, to each of them to allow them to do a brief introduction about their practice and their experience.
Thank you, Corey. I thought you were going to introduce us nicely. No? Guess not. Okay, my name is Jasmine, as you heard. That was the only intro you heard from him. I practice exclusively in personal injury. I was called to the bar in 2006, and from then all the way to now, I've just done personal injury. I started off as part of a firm. Um, I'm not sure if any of you recall Jack Fireman, but he was my articling principal, and I was with him for many years until he retired. He's passed away now, but he was a wonderful man to learn from because he had years and years of experience. So I was part of that firm, and then started my own when he retired. And my firm, we started, I think, 2017. And at that time, I still had about 18 people at my firm. And then the pandemic happened. Fast forward, I made a lot of changes and a lot of soul searching in terms of what I wanted to do in life, and have reduced the size of my firm tremendously. Right now, I'm the only lawyer at my firm, and I think I might keep it that way.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ronald. So in terms of practice areas, I specialize in corporate commercial law and real estate law. I'm a little bit more of a recent call, I guess. I am a 2015 call. I started my practice in my second year of call, so maybe that's a little bit more unusual than some other lawyers. In terms of where I practice, my office is up in Markham, but these days I'm fully remote. I fully work from home. My staff are all fully remote, so all of my meetings as well are virtual. So I guess I have clients that are kind of all over the place, so it's not really specific to Markham. Yep.
So, we thought with the panel that it would be a bit more informal. We'd have a chance to sort of talk a bit about our experience. Also, for those of you that want, if you have questions or some things that you would like to discuss with, don't feel free to speak up. But to help facilitate the discussion, we just sort of set out a few questions, pretty basic stuff that we'll go over, and I'll get Jasmine and Ronald to speak about, and I'll also put in my 2 cents. But to start off, one of the questions that we asked is, what makes someone choose solo practice? And, for me, I've been practicing 16 years, and I'm a solo for a year and a half, and maybe a few months more now. But for me, it was really a situation where I was at a point in my career where I needed more control. I needed more balance. And I'm a very techie guy. I like AI. I like automating things and doing as much as I can with technology. And, in a firm environment, people are always looking for standards. And they would like sort of a common approach, common feel oftentimes. And that common approach was never my high tech, trying to leverage things as much as possible, and also better work-life balance. So for me, it was a decision where it was about balance, it was about control, and also from a business point of view, the firm. I had a large estate litigation practice in Barrie, and I moved it to Peterborough. I brought 80 files over, and I was very busy. But one of the challenges that I ran into is that when I moved to the Peterborough, which is a bit of a smaller center to Barrie, was the firm I went to was a very well-established estate firm. And that meant they had about 60% of the damn wills in my county. And so when when there was conflicts and things that would give rise to my type of work, over half of my market I was conflicted out of. So me moving out on my own was based on lifestyle, control, and also from a business point of view, wanting to make sure that I could participate more fully in the local market.
My answer is very different. First of all, there's some people that dream of having their own firm, and that's amazing. I just wanted to practice law and make money and help people. That was all that was on my mind. And I actually didn't even choose personal injury. Admittedly, I didn't really know exactly what personal injury was because back when I graduated, we didn't have courses in insurance law and personal injury, and people weren't allowed to advertise at that time. The Law Society hadn't relaxed the rules like they did, in the early or mid 2000s. And so I really didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to do litigation. And so I got my articling job in personal injury. I knew it was civil litigation, but I really didn't know much more. And then I realized that everyone was injured and realized that we do personal injury. But I grew to love it. I really enjoyed that I was working with real people with real issues that listened to me, that took my advice. And so I stuck with it. And with that in mind, the landscape has changed a lot in personal injury. So there's been changes to the laws that have made things a little bit more difficult for injured individuals, and it's made it a lot more difficult for lawyers to make money. I mean, I wish I could help everyone for free, but I also have expenses and children, and so it has to make sense. And so big firms, so a lot of them have constricted or consolidated because the expenses are so large to operate the firms. The pandemic changed things a lot from personal injury and litigation because we've got huge backlogs at the courts. That means you're carrying huge disbursements. We fund our files, so we have to pay for our expert reports. Our expert reports are like $3,000 to $5,000 each, and you don't just get one. You're supposed to do 3 and get leave for more than 3. But if you have a big file, everyone's getting more than 3, and so it just adds up. We also work on volume because we work on contingency fee, which a lot of people, they get annoyed when they see how much personal injury lawyers make on a file. But I'm like, actually, we're running that file for 5 years. And if you do the math, 5, 6, 7 years, if you do the math, we're actually making less than your hourly rate. And we actually, in most cases, not all, but we also help people who otherwise could not afford a lawyer. They couldn't afford that initial retainer amount. They couldn't afford the hourly rate. Well, it's actually a minute rate, in my opinion, because you're paying for each minute, and then it's rounded up. So I think we're doing a good service for people. But going back to what I was saying, for me, it was more about, okay, what is happening in the world around me because of the legal changes, because of the pandemic and how that shifted things, what made sense. My boss retiring, I mean, I had it good at his firm in the sense that he was very old and didn't care as long as he was making money. So I got to run the firm, and I had no liability. And so I started off as an articling student, went to associate, then partner, name partner, managing partner, and then he wanted to retire, and I'm like, oh, now what do I do? Because I don't want the liability of having my own firm. Like, who wants that? I haven't had that all these years, and I've just been doing whatever I want on someone else's dime. This is great. However, I went to meet with different people at different firms, and that's where that whole, fit, everyone talks about fit, where you fit in, and I never thought about it because I'd been at the same firm for so many years. But I realized that I didn't fit in anywhere. Some of these firms were fantastic. They were really good places, but one firm, for example, every Friday morning, they would meet together and discuss the new law, and I'm like, that's great. That's phenomenal. I think that's wonderful that you're doing this and you're taking the initiative. But I'm like, but I go out on Thursday night. Friday morning is going to be really brutal. How am I going to get out of this? And if that's my initial thought, then that's really not the right fit. I give you a crazy example, but there was other things, the way people worked and the way they collaborated, and I did not find the right place. I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually have to grow up. I actually have to open my own firm. And so I did that, and everyone thought I was crazy because personal injury is a very saturated area. There's too many, I think, of us. But and it's highly competitive. But I already had my book of business established, so I wasn't too concerned. I mean, I was, but I wasn't. And so I started my own firm, and I already knew how to do a lot of the stuff for starting my own firm because I've been doing it at my prior firm already. It just wasn't for me; it was for the firm. And then when the pandemic happened, I had to make the difficult decision of laying off a lot of staff because the courts were closed for the first time in history. 6 months is a long time. We also did not have the virtual world. We didn't do discoveries and mediations and pretrials and motions virtually, so everything stopped. And if nothing is moving, then no one in my firm had anything to do. I mean, I always had a backlog of work to do, so I had lots to do. I managed to settle out old files and the stacks that were on my desk. One day I'll get to them. I got to them. So this was all good, but I had to lay off people, and they also did not really want to work because they had their own anxiety about what was happening in the world. So there was that difficult decision, and then I had to cut expenses and just constrict and then figure out, okay, what are we doing? And then no one got injured during the pandemic, which is great for society, but it's not so good for personal injury lawyers. So where was the business going to come from? And then I have a business background, and so I own other things and operate other things. And I was losing my mind sitting in my office. And so, an office building I had purchased a few months before the pandemic that was now empty. So, I was having my own issues and thinking, okay, what am I going to do? So, I started buying other businesses and actually thought I might phase out of law altogether last year because I just didn't like dealing with the courts. I still don't like it. Like, I keep having these motion records rejected for stupidity, and you can't talk to anyone. You can't call anyone. They don't want to talk to you. I asked them, I said, I did everything you told me to do in the last rejection for this approval motion. And what do I need? Well, I didn't. I made my assistant call, and she was on hold for like hours. I said, just do something else. Just keep them on hold. They'll eventually pick up. And so she was told to look at the practice direction for Central West. And so she's like, I don't know what this means. And we looked, and we looked, and we looked, and I'm like, call them back. Ask them what practice direction they're talking about. And then they said, we're rejecting everything if you don't bookmark and hyperlink. I'm like, bookmark what? It's like a really simple in-writing motion. Like, what do they want me? So I've tried to figure out bookmarking, and I don't know what they want me to bookmark. I've just put bookmark. So hopefully they accept it. I don't know what to do. I've even shown up at the Newmarket Courthouse once with my motion record in hand. Like, my office is in Midtown Toronto. And everyone in Toronto knows what traffic is like. But I was on a mission. I need to get paid too also. So like this can't just be sitting, and I have all these lawyers waiting for the approval, and I've got my client, and just everyone staring at me like, are you incompetent? Why aren't you getting this done? And I'm like, it's not me. So anyway, I went to the Newmarket Court, stood there, handed it over, and said, I've got it. No, they're like, we also need it on a USB, so you might want to come back. I go, actually, in my purse, I happen to have the USB. It's like they just didn't want to take it, but they ended up having to. But these are the types of things. I can laugh about it now in front of you and at a cocktail party, but it's not funny when I'm actually doing it. It's very aggravating. And so all of this combined with, okay, we're not settling for as much. There's not as many injured people. Like all these, there's too much lateral movement with staff. That's another issue I've had, all pandemic related. I could go on and on with the issues. But is this something I really want to do? And I figured out that yes, I love what I do. It grounds me. It makes me feel good. I get to meet wonderful people like you that I wouldn't otherwise meet. And there's so many positives about practicing law, but I needed to do it in a way that worked for me at this point in my life. And now with my kids, I've got 3, and with all of these other passion projects and businesses that I have. And I keep saying that just to let you know, and then I will pass it on. So I've got the 3 kids, 18, 14, 12. Amazing. They're amazing. My house is so much fun. And I own bars and I own real estate and I have a few other little pet projects. So working alone has enabled me to pick and choose the files I want, which is fantastic. I don't have to worry about all the mouths to feed in terms of lawyers because I don't have to worry about finding files. Because a lot of my time went on trying to find files to feed everybody. And then when they left, I was like, oh my God, I spent months cleaning up the messes. Months. I couldn't even believe some of the files and what had happened. And I'm like, did I let my firm get to this point? but I can't watch I can't micromanage every detail. So doing as much as I could. So I am realizing that this right now in my life, me with my staff, and I have wonderful staff, thankfully, um, is the way to go.
So my story is also quite different um, from the other two people who are speaking here today. So, as I mentioned earlier, I started solo practice in my second year of call. This was largely actually just kind of out of circumstance. I hadn't made some, huge decision that this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. Um, Essentially, for me, I was just looking for work at the time. So in the midst of looking for work, I had bills to pay. I had to pay rent, everything like that. So I started taking on some kind of small friends and family kind of work, just learning little things here and there, simple things that I could kind of help with, that I had done some of before. And then in doing so, the more and more I did it, the more and more I realized I like this a lot more than working at a firm or, which I didn't have too much experience of as a lawyer, but, even like articling, summarizing, everything like that, just it was very different because I was able to build systems, build processes in the way that I wanted to. I wasn't restricted to what I guess my boss or the more senior lawyers wanted to, the way they wanted to do things or what they wanted to do. I was very much free to kind of create my firm in whichever way that I wanted, and that's very much been the driving factor of eventually I just realized, well, this is just I like this more than getting a job, so I just stopped looking for a job, and then I just now it's however many years it's been later, I guess 7, 8, 6, 7, I don't know, however many years it's been, and I think I can never look back. Like the benefits of, for me at least, of operating your own firm is just that you can, like Corey said earlier, like you can kind of do it however you want. You're not restricted in terms of what anyone else wants you to do or how anyone else wants you to do it. You can just kind of build your own systems and build your own processes. Fortunately for me, I also have a bit of a business background prior to going into law, so that certainly was helpful. So, yeah, that's just kind of my story of how I got into solo practice.
So to discuss a little bit more, we've talked about some of the reasons why we did it, and that touches on some of the pros. But some of you, I don't know how many of you are doing a solo practice already versus possibly being interested in it. I think most of us might already be doing this. But with some of the cons that came up as far as my expectations, things like staff, right? Like I don't have staff. So when I have, an urgent application to be issued and I try to get dates from the court and somebody needs to be on hold for 2.5 hours, like it is burdensome. So I've gotten really good with, I wear headphones. If you see me around, I oftentimes have headphones on, like little ones, over the ear ones that you can still talk to people. And that's because I got used to being on the phone for hours and doing other things. I would have entire conversations while I was on hold, with other people. But some of the cons are, dealing with that side of the stuff for me. I'm at the point now where I need to bring on more resources. Jasmine actually helped me out with that. And so that was one of the things that was challenging for me because, taking on the responsibility, and it's one thing when I'm out there and I'm doing everything myself and I bill the clients and I'm paying my bills, but when I'm responsible for somebody else, it's going to be, for me, that's mentally challenging, not financially or anything with the business, but I get uneasy. And also, my practice, I have a physical office downtown Peterborough. I would tell you that I'm there about 20% of the time, and that's when I'm actually meeting people. Otherwise, most of my work is done out of my home office, in my house. So, but I think the other cons is, I do feel like I'm sort of in my own bubble. Like I'm going along, everything seems fine. I think I'm doing a good job, but I don't have the the instant feedback that I used to have. And it takes, one of the things is it takes events like this where I'm out and I'm talking to other lawyers and whatnot. And so being involved has become more important because, believe it or not, you guys are where I get some of my feedback about some of the things, right? So I think for me, that's been a bit of a challenge. But I'll hand it off to some of the others to talk about the pros and cons from their point of view.
So I would say that you may have gathered I'm a social person. So one of the cons are you're a little bit lonely at times. However, that's kind of the way the world is. I was talking about this right before we started speaking on this panel formally. But I was talking to Corey and Ronald about how like I miss the days where we used to be in court and we would form new relationships with people just by sitting beside them for hours, and you know have to amuse yourself somehow. So you chat with them, and some of the people I met at trial scheduling court when I was a junior or an articling student, and it's like I don't know how many years, 17 years, 18 years, whatever, how many long time. I'm still in touch with these people. I wouldn't hesitate to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know, you remember you were working on that case? Like, can you tell me what happened, or do you have a precedent or something? The young people right now, it's not just the young, the new lawyers right now aren't getting that, and I miss it. And I realize there's efficiency with not being in person for discoveries and mediations and simple motions and trial scheduling, but we're losing something else. And I'm wondering if the trade-off is really worth it. I don't know. I don't think so. But it's unfortunate to see. So while I feel like, okay, me, myself, and I is a little bit isolating. I have my staff, thankfully, but it's just kind of the way the world has gone anyway. I've got friends at firms, and they don't even see each other because most of them work from home now. And so it's isolating, and trying to get people to all come to the office and be there on the same day and set those kinds of rules is creating a lot of other issues, which are beyond the scope of this panel, but you all know what they are. So it's you know, I'm like, is this just the way the world is, or is it because I'm working on my own? But I think it would be the same either way to some degree. So that's the con for me. The other con I would say is similar to Corey. You don't have like everything. The buck stops with you. You don't have resources. You don't have a lot of other people that can do your job. Like sometimes I'm conflicted. You know, I'm double booked with things. It happens. I know it sounds crazy, but it happens. Sometimes triple booked, and I'm like, well, I don't have anyone to give this to. Like I used to be like walking into the junior's office and be like, you're doing a discovery tomorrow, and they're like, what? Or actually, you know what? Can you go run this to the court because I forgot it has to be there like today, and it's too late to get a process server. Like I don't have that, and so there's a lot more. Looking at my calendar to try to plan as much as possible, but sometimes it just is impossible to plan, and so it just adds a lot of stress to my life. But somehow, I keep reminding myself it always gets done.
So I guess in my experience, kind of the biggest cons with respect to solo practice, as opposed to practicing in a firm, I guess they kind of differ at various points of my practice. So in the beginning, I would say the biggest con was when you first start out. I mean, depending on if you're bringing any business with you when you're starting out, you don't really have much to do, right? Like you might not have a book of business, that you might not have clients that you bring with you. So your job is now to go out there and get business, right? And I would say in the very beginning of practice, actually even now in practice, a large part of what I do is not being a lawyer, per se. Like when you operate your own practice, you're really running a business more, as much as you are being a lawyer. Not that I don't do legal work, but it's not just legal work anymore. When I worked at a firm, when I was, summaring or articling, the work gets brought to you. Like Jasmine said, it's just, a senior partner, a senior associate who comes and tells you, okay, I need you to do something right now. And you're like, oh, okay, sure. But when you're going out solo, like, the good and bad is like, yeah, you can control it, but if you don't go out there and get the work, there is no work to do, right? So really, you kind of have to draw the business. At this stage of my practice, what I'm kind of running into in terms of a con is kind of the flip side of building your own schedule. Like one, I can choose when I want to work. I can choose what clients I want to take on. But the negative side of that is what Corey and Jasmine were saying, the buck really does stop with you. So, for example, for right now, I'm the only lawyer at my firm. I have 2 full-time remote staff, and then I have some contract staff that I use kind of for overflow. But I'm the only lawyer at the firm. So what happens now if I want to go on vacation? That's really, really difficult right now because I don't have, it's not so easy because, confidentiality, everything like that. I can't just simply pass off an ongoing file to another lawyer at my firm because there is no other lawyer at my firm, right? So if I want to take a lot of time off for an extended period of time, that's very difficult. Or I'm working, recently I had, I had a newborn about a year ago, so she just turned 1 about 2 weeks ago. And then we tried to go away a few times, just kind of to take some time off and everything like that. And I found that even though I went out to Hawaii, even though I was in Hawaii, I still had to work every day and I still had to manage stuff because I can't just stop everything that's going on and there's no one else that I can pass it off to. So for me, the pro of the time management is my work schedule is mostly 9 to 5, 9 to 5:30, right? And that's very much of my own doing. But in terms of taking longer periods of time off, I would say that's quite difficult at this point. For myself and my firm, I'm looking to kind of expand and maybe get some other lawyers on board. And when that happens, then that problem will be a little bit easier to deal with. But in the first at least while for solo practice, when it's just yourself, that might be an issue that you run into.
One of the other talking points that we thought we would touch on is the question about what did you wish you knew before you started your solo practice. And so for me it would be electronic banking, the Form 9As, those sorts of things. I was probably 2 or 3 months in, and I'd given up on checks, and I was doing e-transfers for everything. Life seemed good, and then I had somebody else that went out on their own about a year ahead of me, just had their Law Society audit, and they didn't have their Form 9As. And next time I went out for lunch with him, he was like, "Make sure you're doing your Form 9As." And I'm like, "What?" So some of those things, because it's not in a rule book somewhere, and unless you're digging down into the bowels of the Law Society's website about trust management, that's not something that's there. And when you have checks and everything, you don't need to do those separate forms, right? So that was one of the things that I wished I knew a little bit more about. But I think for me, it was mainly the admin side of stuff. I got myself out of feeling overwhelmed pretty quickly because I immediately got a bookkeeper and stopped doing my own books because that was, I do estate litigation, so I do passing of accounts and I look at numbers every day. And if I have to look at my own numbers all the time, I'll go a little bit crazy, I think. But those were probably the 2 bigger things for me.
So going back to my pre-pandemic days, there was something exciting about having a big firm, having a big office, having lots of people. It was exciting and felt great to go to work. I didn't realize that by having all of that I was spending a lot of my time managing all of that and not practicing law. And while it sounds glamorous, it's not. You're constantly managing stupidity, trivial issues. This staff member is upset at that staff member because she is sitting in her desk when she's not there, and blah blah blah. I don't want to deal with this. And this lawyer is upset because I assigned a file to that lawyer, and why do I not like them? Do I not think they're doing well enough? Can they have a performance review? I'm like, performance review? If it's bad, I'll tell you. Why do we have to do this? So managing people, and then there's the actual office management. Oh, the Rogers went down. The internet went down. Okay, so call Rogers. Well, we need you to be there because it's in your name, and you didn't assign anyone on the account. I'm like, oh my God. Like just one thing after another, after another, after another. You could spend your whole day just managing. And when when I decided after the soul searching to have my own firm and just me, and I'm going to just choose my files and enjoy being a lawyer, and have my staff, and I just felt like a huge weight off my shoulders. Like I am doing what I enjoy doing. Does Rogers still go down? Yes, it does. But there's a lot less to deal with, and the overhead from a cost perspective is significantly lower. Like I would have sleepless nights. I'm like, I don't know how I'm making payroll because the checks didn't come in. Where am I getting the money? Because I had 6 figures to go out every month before, just to hit the expenses, and that doesn't factor in the disbursements and things like that. So it was challenging, and stressful at times, and I don't have that weight on my shoulders anymore. And so now you see very happy Jasmine. I'm like, oh, I don't have to work today if I don't feel like it. So no, it's good, but I'm really happy, and I wish that the one thing that, in answer to the question, that I knew is that sometimes the grass is greener on the other side.
I would say what I wished I knew when I was first starting solo practice is that it's actually very important to learn to make your time more efficient, even if you have to pay money to do so. I would say when I first started, because I didn't really have any clients. I was just kind of starting out on my own. I tried to do everything myself. I tried to do, like Corey said, I tried to do all my bookkeeping, all my accounting myself, all my admin, everything like that, everything by myself. And it's terrible. Like, it's very, very difficult, right? Like, for me, it went to the extent of just trying to cut costs initially. I didn't, I tried to minimize the different types of softwares that I was using so that I could, it's like I don't have that many files. I don't need practice management software right now. I'll just use like an Excel spreadsheet. Awful. Just terrible. Like, it's just absolutely not worth it. So, I mean, that was in the very beginning. So I think it's important to kind of look at what tools are at your disposal in order to make your life a little bit easier so you can focus on the things you're good at and to focus on the, building up your firm if you want to. Things like software, things like even people, resources. Jasmine was mentioning before in a previous talk that the three of us had in terms of finding other kind of contract staff or contract lawyers to kind of take on certain parts of files that you may not want to do, or finding staff in that way. And the cost initially may be very daunting, especially if you're starting out, you don't have a lot of revenues yet. But, as time goes on, like if you save your own time, your time is arguably worth a lot more than the amount that you'll be spending on these resources. And then you can use that time to go out and do the actual legal work that gets you paid, or find more business, or find more clients, that kind of thing. And that's something I wish I knew from the very beginning, instead of just spending a lot of fruitless hours doing things that I'm not trained to do and I'm not very good at, and just wasting a lot of time that way. Yeah.
I'm just going to add to what you said because it made me think of something. But I think that when you do have your own firm, one of the things that you tend to do, at least I do, is it's just faster if I do it myself. Actually, I think I did that even when I was part of a big firm. But it's just faster if I do it. Explaining is harder, and I'll just write the letter myself. I'll just do it myself. And there's only so many hours in a day, and it's only recently where I'm letting go. This is growth. My office manager says she's very proud of me because she sees growth. I'm like, okay, growing. So I am letting go of some of these tasks and delegating more. And I think that, as I said, when you're on your own, you're like, oh, I have to do everything myself. But you don't. You don't have to do everything yourself. You can delegate, and it's helpful, and then you can do what you are supposed to be doing, right?
Before we sort of talk about like who may best be suited for solo practice, just quickly, just by a show of hands, is there anybody in the room that is currently not in solo practice? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, because for those of us that are doing it right now, if you have hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end, but if there's issues that you're running into, one of the things with solos that I have found is that we're pretty good at networking and talking amongst ourselves when we get the opportunity to connect. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like when you're dealing with solos and somebody's reaching out to you, there's not the same sort of internal competition at a firm or anything. It's like that. It's like, oh yeah, I dealt with that, and I found solos to be very supportive, right? Like I told you that there was the gentleman in my area that helped me with some of the forums and things like that. But that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. But when we look at who's best suited for solo practice, I mean, it has to be somebody that, I might not be as business oriented as the two of you, but that has some of that aspect of things. Like I can be social, I can network a little bit to bring in some clients. But I think it does have to be somebody that has the self-discipline to drive everything themselves, right? Like, it's not a situation, and what do they call it? Grinders in the firm cultures and stuff. Like I know many good lawyers that are grinders, but like they're not interested in doing any of this extra stuff. They want to clock in the morning, do their legal work, and be done when they're done. My wife is also a lawyer. She is like that, right? She looks at what I do and she thinks I'm crazy. But at the same time, I think if you have that business drive a little bit, that it really allows you a lot more freedom. And I think, the last year and a half have been some of the happiest for me as far as lawyering is concerned, because I've been able to engage that aspect of my skill set, whereas when I was in a firm environment, that wasn't, the senior and managing partners were doing all of that, and my ability to do that stuff was sort of tangential and over here on the side, waiting to be utilized at some point.
So, one of the benefits of solo practice is that you can make it whatever you want it to be. You can be very busy and have, I don't know, hundreds of files, maybe. Or you can have just a couple of files, depending on what point in your life you are at and what you want to do. So that's the benefit. However, I don't think everyone is best suited for it. You have to make sure that you're okay getting your hands dirty. Because there's some lawyers that, and it's not wrong, it's just difference in wants, desires, attitudes. But there's some lawyers that they don't want to do the stuff that is not very glamorous. Like, I can't think of a lot of examples right now, but sometimes, if someone's not there and, well, even if they're there sometimes, like I have to figure out, last week I didn't remember how to use the fax machine because I hadn't used it in so long. And this one doctor only accepts faxes. So I'm standing here and I'm like, do we have to press pound first? Because I remember we had one machine that you had to press pound. And my office manager, I think she was watching just for entertainment. She's like, no, we haven't had that machine in years. I'm like, okay. So, you have to figure out how to do things yourself. Like, I could have asked her, obviously, but she was doing something else, and I didn't want to take her away, and I wanted this to go out. So that's my one little example. But there's so many examples of things that you're going to have to do on your own, that if you're part of a firm, they would just stare at you oddly if you even tried to do it on your own. Some of these big firms especially, like they've got mail rooms and copy rooms and I don't know, all this fancy stuff. So we don't have that, I don't think. At least I don't.
I guess in my view, in terms of where it might not be well suited to go into solo practice is, I guess as a solo practitioner, I guess in the very beginning at least, I think there's a level of risk inherent to starting your own business that not everybody can kind of deal with. I remember when I first kind of started, there were a lot of, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of sleepless nights. Like, how am I paying rent? Right? Like, how am I getting the business out there? Like, how am I gonna be able to go out and kind of build the practice? And I think the reality is, like, if you're first starting out, it does take a little bit before things get going, right? Like, and there's no guarantee really that things are gonna get going, right? So I think, if you're going solo or if you're early in the stages of your solo practice, that's something that you just have to be able to stomach. You just have to be able to say, you know what, like, I can't sleep, I have anxiety, but I believe in myself, I'm gonna be able to push through that, and this is something I want, I want whatever I'm going for at the end of the tunnel, and that's my reason for doing this. And I think some people are able to do that, and some people just prefer just, like more stability, like more, you know, like yeah, just something more predictable. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Solo practice is like certainly, as we've gone over today, like it has its pros, it has its cons, and it isn't for everybody. I definitely have a lot of friends and know a lot of lawyers who just prefer the predictable nature of where they're working, and kind of how their careers have gone, even at at my point in my career. And I can definitely say that, like, I don't think that they would enjoy what I do, kind of in my practice, and the things that, like, how building my practice has gone in the past couple of years. Like, definitely, I don't think it's for everybody, and I think you do need a certain level of, I guess, ability to stomach risk, I guess, is what I would call it.
So we're totally like late now. We're a minute over schedule. But if any of you have issues that you would like to ask questions about, if you think any of us in the room that are doing solo stuff that might be able to assist. Also, if I talked about the fact that the people in my community have been very good to me. If there's things that you're looking for or you want to have some sort of discussion, you should be able to find my email. I'm always happy to talk to another lawyer that's in that situation. Maybe you're dealing with some sort of admin thing that I might need to deal with in the future. Maybe I've dealt with it already. But I encourage you, if you are having any of those issues, feel free to reach out. And other than that, you have approximately 8 minutes to find your next session room.